Hello, Sooner Nation, OU Insider subscribers, Coach Brian Clinton enthusiasts, people who have any kind of rooting interest in the NFL playoffs, which begin this weekend. My team is the Cowboys, so the soul got ripped out of my body long before this year. So thankfully, I don't even have to pretend to root for them in the playoffs this year. But unlike my co-host here, Mr. Brian Clinton, your team is still in the fight, Brian, and you've got an interesting matchup coming up.
Yes,
that's Monday night.
Monday night, yeah.
How do you feel about your Vikings going up against the Los Angeles Rams?
Well, it's one of two teams to beat Minnesota this year. It was on a short week, so this is a little different. I'm really glad that it's supposed to be Monday and not Saturday. I was afraid they were going to end up getting the Saturday slot, but they didn't. I feel all right about it. I think trying to see the bright side of things, I'm optimistic that Sam Darnold had his down game in week 18 rather than the first week of the playoff. Like, hopefully if you're going to hit the reset button, that's probably the time to do it. They'd won 9 games in a row up to that point. So the team's good enough. It's just about bouncing back. So we'll see how things go.
Well, I should also say, I neglected to mention in my intro that this is another episode of the Oklahoma Drill podcast fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. I started to record. I pressed record and I started thinking about, oh, you're wearing your Vikings hat. And then I started to get depressed that I'm a Cowboys fan. And that is what ended up taking over.
I'm sure we'll be sharing in depression soon. So,
hey, at least your team has good vibes. I mean, I know the loss to the Lions was tough, but like in Detroit, the Lions defense playing out of their mind despite them being on their 6th string. I mean, the Cowboys, it's just like, okay, we're going to deny Mike McCarthy interviewing with the Bears. Like, okay.
Yeah. Can he still go and like on the 14th if he wanted to at that point? Like, anyways, weird.
But I'll be honest, since I can approach these playoffs, without having like a real rooting interest, I don't hate the Lions. I don't hate the Vikings. The Sam Darnold story's been awesome. And then you've got Baker Mayfield on Sunday night.
Yeah.
That's going to be.
Yeah.
If you're an OU fan, you got to tune in Sunday night at the very least, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what he's done this year is, I mean, I never didn't believe in him, but the fact that he's not only completely redeemed himself to being like at worst an above average quarterback this year is nothing short of really, really impressive.
Yeah, what he's put together over the last 2 seasons has pretty well proven he's exactly who OU fans thought he was. It also just so happens to prove that Cleveland's a cesspool, man. Like it's just a hard place to be successful at that position.
It is, and good Lord, I mean that's already the worst trade of the last 10 years, if not in NFL history. Yeah. I mean, good Lord.
It's pretty bad.
But there's so many ways that this thing with Baker could have gone, especially the Carolina stint where he's out of the league, and to not only, he's been a top 10 quarterback in the NFL this year. And the fact that the Bucs have, he is their franchise, and they have kind of not only fully bought in, but they've kind of like they take after him. That entire franchise does. Right. It's incredible to see what's happening.
Well, and when it all started with that Thursday night game, whenever he came in on a short week for St. Louis for the Rams in LA, came in and started and won that game. Like that's just that, like that personality, that personification, that's who he is. And for him to just be able to have a locker room around him that appreciates him, it's awesome to see. It's so cool. Like his trajectory as an NFL quarterback has just been so cool to watch.
Not a hot take. I'm a Baker guy.
Same. Yeah.
How could you not be? How can you not be a Baker Mayfield guy?
If you like orange, like that's the only reason why you wouldn't like Baker Mayfield. Like if you're a fan of the orange teams, but
I'd
even at
like to
that point,
think
I think there's some respect at that point.
I'd
Like
like to
you've
think he
earned
could
that.
you could transcend, like someone like him can even transcend that, but
You would think.
you would think maybe the
Yeah.
orange folks, maybe not. I don't know. Brian, we ain't recorded our last pod really late in the week.
My
I mean,
fault.
and that pod published on, is it Saturday?
Believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. And a couple of things have happened for Oklahoma since we recorded that pod. We need to talk about those things. You made a couple of, let's say, splashes. I'm going to
Yeah,
call them
for
splashes.
sure.
Splashes in the transfer portal. You've got Kendall Daniels out of Oklahoma State. You got Marvin Jones Jr., a defensive end and edge player out of Florida State. And Brian, before I let you go, I'm gonna say I kind of divide these in. Not that edge wasn't a position in need because you're losing Ethan Downs, you're losing Caden Woolard, but OU really needed a linebacker,
Yeah.
and they really needed an experienced linebacker. Because I mean, we had talked about this last week. You start looking at, once you factored in Stutzman, McCullough, and Lewis Carter leaving, you look at the rest of that linebacker room, and it's like, who
Hmm.
you're either hoping Jaron Kanig takes a huge leap, or you're hoping a couple of those young guys hit
Yeah.
if you don't add somebody. And they've added somebody. Let's talk about Kendall Daniels first. And Brian, I've got my thoughts. I've been able to dive more into the numbers and watch a little bit more of his film the last couple of days. What's your impression of this addition? What does this mean for Oklahoma?
So with this being an Oklahoma guy, just from Beggs, and this is somebody that I remember following before I was on the beat, just as somebody following recruiting. And when he landed with Oklahoma State, I remember thinking to myself, they just got a dog. Like that guy, I mean, he's got the right mentality. He's got that. I mean, coming out of high school, I believe he wasn't light out of high school. I think he was like 6'4", 190 pounds, 195 pounds, somewhere in
195,
that
I
area.
think.
And I mean, looked like a guy that could absolutely make a difference. And he very quickly found himself on the field for Oklahoma State. I believe he was like Big 12 newcomer or Big 12 freshman of the year. Um, was just all kind. I mean, just absolutely played well at safety for them. This last year transitioned up to linebacker, put on some weight, and played honestly what I felt was kind of out of position. He was more in the box than he wasn't. I I like that role for him, but I think he is at his best in open space, kind of like on the edge um, of the defense, not necessarily at the line of scrimmage, but more like in that um, kind of role that you would have imagined Deshaun McCullough would have been really good at. Um, Only difference is I think Daniels moves a lot better than McCullough. I think he's a lot quicker. Has been a guy that's been able to stay on the field. Has had pretty good luck with injury history. So really like that. And then the thing that really stands out is there are certain aspects to a player that you see thriving in Brent Venables' schemes, and he fits that. He's athletic, he's long, he's quick, and he has an attitude on the field. And I think all of those things come together. I know that some of these recruiting sites, I know that Rivals and 247, that I know that they all have him listed as a 3-star. This is a big get for Oklahoma. It's huge because it gives you experience at that position, but it also gives you a guy with versatility, which is paramount in that defense. And I think that's going to be a really, really big get for Oklahoma when we roll into week 4, week 5 next year and conference plays kicking off.
You hit a lot of the big points. I mean, because when you start looking at his stats, or just some of the raw numbers, I mean, some of them. I mean, man, he's played almost 2,300 snaps in
Yep.
3 years.
Yep.
2,298 snaps. I mean, that is beyond more experience than anybody else has in that OU linebacker room. And it's not close.
Right.
That's one. Two, when you start looking at some of the alignment snap counts in PFF, I mean, dude, so 2022, first year he really started playing. Here's his alignment snap counts. 36 on the defensive line, 275 in the box, 196 at free safety, 142 in the slot. That's your place. Yeah. It's even more so in 23. 398 in the box, 252 at free safety, 263 in the slot. Then, as you mentioned, you look at this past year, he's almost exclusively in the box. Yeah. He's a little bit more on the defensive line. He lined up in the slot a little, but he's mostly in the box. Yeah. Tailor-made to play Cheetah, if that's where OU wants.
Yes. Yeah.
If that's where OU wants to play him.
Yep.
Here's the other thing. So I tweet out, or once the news is broken for sure, I tweet something out about it. I think mostly about his versatility, the amount of experience he has. I get a couple people, not only on Twitter, but I get a couple people who reach out to me to say, hey, don't know if this is that big of an addition. The gist of it is, look, bad motor, had plays that he takes off, really bad angles on some plays. I know there were, and to be clear, these are more like Oklahoma State people in my life, which I'm not going to discredit because those are people who are watching him more closely than I am. Then, you watch the film. There are a couple moments that don't look great, especially if you isolate them in a 7-second clip. Doesn't look great. Either the effort's not great, angle's not great. And they're particularly from this last year. This is what I would say, and this is somebody who, I'm not fully intimately in the muck of watching his film. I'm not intimately aware of his career. Here's what I know. This dude has played a crap ton of snaps. That's one. How many snaps he played in 23 total? 931. 931 snaps. That is just a lot of snaps, man. That's one. Two, even when you look at this past year for a really, really bad Oklahoma State team, he had 3 games where he played fewer than 50 snaps, and they were 40, 48, and 46. I mean, that dude is just on the field constantly.
Yep.
And this last year for Oklahoma State, it was just a mess, man. They went 3-9. Yep. As bad as things feel at Oklahoma right now, or as they have this year, Oklahoma State went 3-9. I thought they were going to make the conference title game.
I did too.
3-9.
Yeah.
So none of that is to excuse anything like that. All of this is to say, I think you can take some of that with a grain of salt, particularly this past year with how bad things were at Oklahoma State. And two, I just don't think he's going to be playing that many snaps at Oklahoma. I just don't, because when you look at, because even if you look at the prime linebacker spots, unless he beats out Kip Lewis or Kobe McKenzie, he would be playing behind those guys if you're playing him more as a traditional linebacker. Yeah. And if you look at Cheetah, even if he gets the nod there, which I'm still thinking it's going to be Kendall Dolby.
I do
if
too.
He's fully healthy. He's going to be in the mix. It's not just going to be Dolby. It's going to be Sammy Omasigo. It's going to be, does Jaden Hardy get any snaps there? Do any of these young guys, does Mike Boganowski get snaps there? Does Reggie Powers get snaps there? It's just, all that's to say, unless your name is Danny Stutzman or Billy Bowman, the last 3 years, you haven't been playing 50 snaps a game.
Right.
You just haven't. So I think if you're trying to put a positive spin on this, and I know I've been rambling, if you're trying to put a positive spin on this, you're thinking, hey, even though this last year was bad, we're getting him at a bigger stage. Stakes are higher, better defense, and we're not going to have to put 50, 60, 70 snaps on him a game. I
Yeah.
think that's, if you're looking at it from a positive mentality, I think that's the way you can look at it if you're an OU fan. I don't. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
No, yeah, I would agree. I tend to agree with you there. Something I would add to that is if he has an issue, if his motor isn't where it needs to be, if he's got an issue loafing, like the last person I think you're going to be able to play for is Brent Venables. If he's not, if he's loafing, like that is one thing that you, regardless of the defense, of or the offense or the defense under Brent Venables, guys have messed up, have screwed up going 100%. Like there's not, you haven't seen anything about quit or anything about guys taking plays off. That is, it's not an issue. It hasn't been an issue at Oklahoma. So that I would say that much. And the other part I definitely agree with. Um, I do think he has the ability to be more than a quality depth piece. I think he is. I think his ceiling is good enough to break into the starting rotation uh, at some points in the season. But I think what he gives you, honestly, is a guy that is versatile, can play multiple spots, and can probably play those spots at a high enough level that there's not much drop off if he is not a starter, which is what you want. That's exactly what you need. And for teams that are going to run the football and play play physical football where you need to have more guys in the box. This is a guy that you're going to absolutely throw in there over a Kendall Dolby. Maybe with Samuel Masiga, we'll see how much size he gains over the off season. But this is somebody that has shown the ability to be physical, and I think given the right coaching, given the right opportunity at Oklahoma, I think he could butt into somebody that we see make some differences next year.
No, I agree. And you're absolutely right about the effort thing. I mean, regardless of what depth looks like at linebacker or Cheetah next year, OU's not going to play him if he's not giving effort.
Right.
They're just not. I really am not as worried about that as some Oklahoma State fans seem to think that Oklahoma should be worried. I'm just
Right.
not. We also didn't even mention the basic stats for him.
Yeah.
240 tackles, 24 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 5 picks.
Yep.
This past year, for a year where there were effort questions or motor questions or whatever, 64 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Led Oklahoma State in both sacks and tackles for loss.
Yep.
So I think at worst, you're getting a rotation guy that's going to be versatile and give you, I don't know, 20 snaps a game, 25 snaps a game with the upside to be more if it hits.
Yep.
And given what Oklahoma needed at linebacker and or Cheetah to get a guy that's experienced as this and as versatile as he is, you really couldn't have asked for much more out of the portal.
Yeah. No, I agree. And then, it hasn't been reported at some of the major sites or places yet, but Polk's report, which is just somebody that follows Oklahoma State football closely, um, we saw the reports about Jeff Robertson being on campus last year. They actually reported that he committed to OU yesterday during his visit. So don't know what that entails, but that could be another linebacker addition who has lots of experience. I mean, most of his experience early on was through the veil of playing special teams, but uh, still believe he had 53 tackles and 4 sacks this past year as a starter. So somebody else to be keeping an eye on, and another experienced guy coming into a room that's really young and talented but inexperienced.
No, I mean here's the reality. I mean, I think, and if that ends up, I know we've talked about that a little bit on our board as well about Robertson. Here's the reality. I think it's pretty clear that with these moves that OU has identified linebacker depth as an issue.
Yeah.
And it's not only just depth, it's the fact that, yeah, like it's very, very possible that Kip Lewis and Kobe McKenzie take over this linebacker room and they're great next year. Absolutely.
Yep.
You know how many snaps Kobe McKenzie has played total in his career? Just take a guess. In 3 years.
400.
500. 504. 337 snaps this last year.
Okay.
Obvious step up in role and
Right.
responsibilities. Kobe
Yeah.
McKenzie had some good moments. Kip Lewis, I think Kobe McKenzie had good moments. I think this was a breakout year for Kip Lewis. To put this into perspective, Kendall Daniels played 715 snaps this year. Billy Bowman played 745. Stutzman played 709. Nobody else on the team had more than 600.
There you go.
So you're just, I think it's clear that even if Kip Lewis and Kobe McKenzie are your guys, you're going to need more than that. And I think this also, when you look at the, I just don't know if Jaron Kanik is going to be,
What
I
you
don't,
need him to be on the
yeah.
field as much as, yeah.
Yeah. He played in 8 games this year, 92
Yep.
snaps.
Yep.
30 of them came against Maine.
Yep.
That's just the reality. Let's talk about Marvin Jones Jr., who OU added as an edge player, guy that spent his first 2 seasons at Georgia, spent this last year at Florida State. Pretty solid numbers. 300 he played 387 snaps this last year for Florida State, and look, 6'5". I don't know exactly what his weight is. PFF has him at 255. I don't know how accurate that still is. Need to know for sure exactly how big he is, but he's a guy. I mean, he started almost 10 games this year, 6'5" as an edge player. And when you think about now that you're getting, this is the other thing we didn't talk about. R. Mason Thomas is coming back for sure. Huge news.
Yep.
So now you look at that. I mean, Marvin Jones Jr. might slide in and start. I mean, he
Good.
really might.
Absolutely good.
I mean, because here's the other thing about the defensive end rotation. Losing Ethan Downs, who was like the definition of solid. Like,
Yes. Yes.
Not a superstar, but like just damn solid and fundamental. And
Yep.
losing a guy that's experienced, who is that experienced and that solid, hurts. And when
Yep.
you lose Caden Woolard, I mean, those were your defensive end rotation this year was R. Mason Thomas, Caden Woolard, Ethan Downs, and I mean, you got some snaps here and there
From PJ.
from
Yep.
PJ. Trace Ford lined up sometimes at edge, but like you're losing two of your key rotation guys.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of hope that PJ can step into that starting role next year, but that's still a lot of potential. PJ is
Right.
still largely potential.
Right.
Marvin Jones is a guy that has put some stuff on tape. He's got size.
Yep.
I don't know. What do you think about his addition?
Yeah, coming out of high school, he was like a top 25 kind of guy, 5-star, has all the intangibles of being a future NFL draft pick. Hasn't quite lived up to the billing there. But on the flip side of that, this is somebody that has played good quality football for Georgia, played good quality football for Florida State, um, was obviously more involved last year with the Seminoles. But what I see is it's a guy that you can put across from R. Mason Thomas, and he's shown flashes throughout his career of some of that greatness. Um, if you have a guy like that across from R. Mason Thomas, one, that's an excellent thing. Two, this is somebody who comes in with the body type that compares with what you see in PJ.
Yeah.
And somebody that can push him. I see this as, to me, if I'm PJ right now, if I'm PJ Atabara and I see this guy coming in, that tells me they don't expect me, or they don't see me right now as a guy that just sets up as the starter opposite of RMT.
Yeah.
And if he has the right mentality, which obviously I think he does, because we didn't hear any chatter about him entering the portal. That's going to breed that work ethic. That's going to breed that mindset in him to do what he needs to do to take that next step. Because we said this going into last year, if Oklahoma was to get that next step uh, out of PJ, the defense is that much better. Now, RMT comes on and has 9 sacks, which is a great year. I don't want to take anything away from that guy. But if you have two guys that are able to get after the passer, look no further than what South Carolina did to Oklahoma and most of the other teams on its schedule when you have two guys that can get after the quarterback. I think this is a great addition. I think it pushes some of the younger guys on that front, and I think it gives you somebody with a high ceiling that if he gets the uh, right regime around him, right coaching staff around him, can be successful. And I think he makes what was already set to be a pretty good room um, even better.
I mean, you look at the defensive line as a whole. When you
Whew.
think about you're getting Dominic Williams back, Grayson Halton, Jaden Jackson, David Stone. You're getting R. Mason Thomas back. You're getting PJ back. I mean, there's so basically like you've got a really good mix of solid to really good starters with even with upside. I mean, Jaden Jackson. I mean, he was
Immense potential. Yeah.
yeah. I think Grayson Halton can take another step.
Yep.
I
I
think
do
Dominic
too.
Williams can be better.
I do too.
And that group was good. The defensive
Yeah.
tackle room was good.
Yep.
I think it can be better. I mean, David Stone played, but barely.
If he develops into the 3 tech that I think he's going to be, this room next year, like that front next year, is just, I mean, you're talking as good as anybody's got.
Yeah. And so I think you can feel really good about the defensive tackle room. R. Mason Thomas coming back is huge.
Yep.
This is, to me, this is the way I'm kind of approaching the spring and the offseason when it comes to that defensive line. I know what I'm getting out of the tackle room. If David Stone can make a jump, that's huge. But that defensive end, you're getting R. Mason Thomas back. OU needs two other guys to pop. They need, whether that's Marvin Jones Jr., whether that's PJ, whether that's Danny Okoye, like they need two guys to pop because you're losing Ethan Downs, you're losing Caden Woolard, you're losing Trace Ford, who honestly kind of had an underrated season for Oklahoma. And I can tell you this, they want to play more bodies than they did at defensive end this year. They want to play more. And I think the one thing that's missing is, I mean, you've got R. Mason Thomas, put whatever combination of two guys on the interior that you want. Who's going to step up at that other spot? I mean, we just saw the year 3 leap in R. Mason Thomas. Could it be PJ? It absolutely could.
Yeah.
But this wasn't, I mean, he played fewer snaps this year than he did as a freshman.
Yeah. I think I think Marvin Jones, like the best way to explain his addition is he is the perfect buy low candidate.
Yeah.
Like that's the best way to put, because he had 4 sacks at Florida State last year. It wasn't like he didn't play a role for them. That was a bad team. I mean, very similar with what we just talked about with Daniels at Oklahoma State. I feel like this is a buy low candidate where you have a guy that maybe Texas or Penn State, which he was supposed to go to Penn State, I guess, and ended up not going on that visit. But there were high tier programs wanting to try and bring him in. 2 teams that are still left in the playoff, and Oklahoma ends up closing the door on that and getting him. I think it's a perfect candidate for that. And when you've got young talent like you do in PJ Adebawara, and then you've got guys like Danny Okoye behind him and Taylor Wine and guys that have flashed and could take that next jump. I mean, it's just the room is very well rounded out right now.
They made these 2 additions and they're getting some key guys coming back officially without a defensive coordinator. I mean, a lot of this that we just talked about, including R. Mason Thomas coming back, Dominic Williams coming back. I mean, those are official announcements that are coming without a D coordinator.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say on that front. I'm a little surprised someone hasn't been hired.
I am too.
I know we talked about Goodwin last week.
Yeah.
That whole situation's been a little odd. I'll just be honest. it's been weird
Yeah.
from the way it was announced to the comments from Dabo and just the the whole thing's odd.
Yeah.
And there's really no reason. I don't want to speculate too much. There's really no reason for him to not be the defensive coordinator, for that to have for that to not have already been officially announced, unless there was some weirdness in terms of how he's getting out of Clemson, or in terms of some hesitance from Oklahoma's part.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
and I know Parker talked a little bit on the live. I know he's talked a little bit about OU kind of going big game hunting at DC, which I think is interesting
I did too.
because you're really only doing that unless, if you're Venables, you're really only doing that if you're willing to make some concessions in terms of the way the defense is being operated.
Correct.
Right? I don't.
To me, that would scream I am taking any and all suggestions from, if I'm Venables, I'm taking any and all suggestions on how to balance this, and if I need to give up more stuff on the defense to ensure that the offense is run the way that it needs to be, I need to bring in somebody that knows what the heck they're doing. Like
Yeah.
that's what that means to me.
Well, when we talked about it last week, I mean, bringing Goodwin would kind of be a signal of it's going to be Venable's defense with somebody
Right.
running more of the day to day.
Yeah.
This isn't ever not going to be Venable's defense, but big game hunting, you're not going big game hunting and then telling them, whoever that name is, you're not going big game hunting and then as soon as you hire them going, you know what? No to that idea. No to
Right.
that
Right.
idea. Nope. Nope. You're going to do what we want you to do. That just
Yeah.
doesn't
It
make
doesn't
sense.
mesh. It would make sense. Yeah.
No. So I think it's interesting that Goodwin isn't hired by now. And that could very well be what ends up happening. But I think it's interesting. And I would say this, if Venables ends up bringing somebody that he doesn't necessarily have past ties to, whether that was someone like Ted Roof, Zach Alley, Wes Goodwin, if this ends up being like an Arbuckle hire that Venables had no ties to Arbuckle, no connection to Arbuckle, if that ends up being a similar thing on defense, then that would be pretty interesting to me. And I think that would be a pretty big signal of how Venables is trying to operate moving forward.
Yeah.
Is what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. No,
any thoughts?
yeah, I kind of agree on that. I think he's gotten to a point in his short career as a head coach that he's taken a lot of lumps at this point. Things have just not gone well for Oklahoma under his tenure for whatever reason. I mean, there's several things that have played a factor in that, but I think when you look at how guys handle the coaches who have the most success, head coaches that have the most success, most of the time it is in a CEO role of sorts where you're really just coaching coaches. You're a little more hands off in a lot of ways. Obviously you still see videos of Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning and guys, getting underneath the player, like getting into players in practice and things like that. But I think really it becomes more of like a CEO role where you're able to make sure everything is kosher all around. So um yeah, if he goes out and hires somebody that he's not familiar with, that he doesn't have ties to beforehand, to me that says he is pretty much fully entrusting uh whoever comes in to bring a defense that works, and somebody that he can trust to kind of just hand things off to and say, "This is your baby. Uh, I know that you know what you're doing, and I'm trusting you with that. I need to focus on everything else as a whole."
Which
So
again would be interesting considering that that's the conundrum with Brent, right? Is
yeah,
there is that idea that things might be better suited if he is more of a CEO kind of guy, but also the defense and the improvement that it's made speaks for itself. How much do you
correct,
want him to take the hand off the throttle on the defense?
right,
So,
yeah,
but you kind of can't do both,
no,
you
and
know?
I. And I
That's the
and I
thing.
think the worst thing that he could do, maybe that's not the best way of putting it, but I've already started it. One of the worst things I think that he could do this year is have one foot in and one foot out on his
Yeah.
decision. Like you can't go out into 2025 in this year that means so much to not just to him but to the program, not knowing exactly what the game plan is. So I imagine if this is the route they're going, they're going to throw everything they've got in that direction, and you kind of have to go out guns blazing.
Yeah, I agree. Brian, we talked about one of the things that we want to one of the things we want to do over the next few weeks is kind of review the 24 season as a whole for Oklahoma. And I think take it kind of by position group by position group, which I have started doing in written form over at ouinsider.com. So these are, I think, kind of supplements to that in a lot of ways. I think we can get into more of the discussions kind of on top of some of what I've been doing with those position group reviews. I think today is a good day to talk about running back. I don't know why, because running back's not even what I did first, but I was like,
feels like a running back kind of day.
It just feels like a running back type of day. I do want to say before we get into a 2024 review of the running backs, I want to give a quick shout out to our partner at Prize Picks. It's playoff time. It's now or never in the NFL. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. You can win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use code OU Insider to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code OU Insider to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Brian, I think the best way to start with talking about the running back room is just that, again, for kind of the second straight year, it was a weird year for the running backs, and it did not go like I think it was. It did not go like I thought it was going to go.
Yeah.
That's the reality. I put this in that season review that I published a few days ago, but I think you've looked at this too, but the snap counts are so interesting for this running back room. They're so interesting because Javonte Barnes leads the group with 383 despite missing 4 games. Leads the group with 383. Gavin Sawchuk at number 2, 210. Taylor Tatum third at 193. Xavier Robinson fourth with 134. Sam Franklin with 71. And then Caleb Hicks. Caleb Hicks in one game this year, or at least on offense, 18 snaps. I'm going to hand it off to you before we dive into anything else. When you think about this running back room, snap counts, what stands out to you the most about the way this running back group performed?
It's hardly notable, like just the room's success overall. Like it's when you look at things from an entire season's perspective, it's tough to really say, well, that's a great room going forward, but it's also really tough to say that room's in bad shape. Like, I mean, it's just kind of wishy-washy. And we've had this discussion on air. We've had this discussion off air. I don't know that there is a position group right now on this team that has more question marks as to why things are done the way that they are, the way that the rotation goes, than the running back room. To me, it felt very on a whimsical, I guess. Like it felt as if it was like, let's see how Barnes does. Let's run out Taylor Tatum. Oh wait, hold on. Let's get Sam Franklin out there against Navy for 2 back-to-back plays and have him drop the ball and then never see him again. Like it just there were just so many head scratching moments with that group. You thought I mean, you honestly, you felt that Xavier Robinson, after he emerged in that Missouri game, it was like, okay, they lost that game, but at least they found this. And then he comes out against Alabama and has a heck of a game. Then what?
Yeah.
Like it just disappears. Like it completely disappears from the game plan. And I don't know, man. To me, it's frustrating that you have the young talent that you do on that team and that room particularly. I think Tatum and Robinson side by side in two back sets. I think that duo could be one of the best in the SEC, one of the best in the country in 2 years if you gave them time to develop. Unfortunately, I don't know what the heck the plan is going forward for those guys. So I don't know. Yeah, this room has perplexed me for the last 2 seasons, and at no point have I been able to say, "Oh, that's why they're doing it the way that they're doing it."
I think that's the thing for me is that most of my predictions or the things that the way that I thought things would play out for the running back room the last 2 years, it just hasn't happened that way at all. I mean,
Yep.
when you think about last year and you think about, oh well, I mean, Eric Gray's gone. Um, it's going to be the Javante Barnes show, and then Barnes through a bunch of things, mainly injuries, barely played. And then it was kind of the Tawi Walker season for a little bit, and then Gavin Sawchuk emerges late in the year, crazy run of games to end the year. You come into this year thinking it's going to be Sawchuk because that's just what, and
Yep.
we saw practice. It wasn't just a guess. We're in practices in the spring. We're in practices in the fall. It's Gavin Sawchuk running as the one,
Yep.
and then it was Javante Barnes as the leader of the group, and I think, and so all of this is kind of in discussion of, I mean, you expect these guys. I mean, Caleb Hicks is gone, but you expect. I mean, this is a group. It's going to be the same group largely heading into
Yeah.
next season, and I
Yeah.
think, and you kind of hit it on the head. I think if there's anything that we've learned, it's, I mean, DeMarco Murray can identify talent. I mean, certainly,
Yes.
heck of a recruiter. There is no doubt about Taylor Tatum's potential. There's no doubting Xavier Robinson's potential. The the rotations continue to be interesting, and that's a nice way to put it. They continue to be
Yes.
interesting.
Yes.
Um, Gavin Sawchuk had 61 rushing yards for the entire year. 61 heading into the bowl game. 61, which is just also a shocking thing to think about. He had 61. And then he gets the bulk of the work against Navy. I mean, Barnes is out. Sawchuk gets the bulk of the work. And not only does Sawchuk get the bulk of the work, Sam Franklin is the second running back on the field. Drops back-to-back passes. Then he's done for the day. Xavier Robinson and Taylor Tatum combined for 10 rushing attempts against Navy. 10. And in my head, I'm going into that thinking it's going to be the Tatum and Robinson show.
Absolutely.
They were barely on the field in the second half.
Yeah.
It's just I don't look. There's been offensive line issues. There's been offensive issues as a whole. But to me, the running back room has had great moments. You mentioned, I mean, Xavier Robinson against Bama. Javante Barnes was maybe through the first 6 games the most consistent player this team had.
Yep.
Had some good moments in SEC play despite the offense being bad, but like it has never really felt like the room as a whole the last 2 years has found a really good rhythm. And I think this year in particular, it just seemed chaotic.
Yeah.
At
It
times.
was totally discombobulated, like is the best way. Like you just watching any team in any era of football that's had success offensively, you knew who your guy was. Like you knew who the running back was going to be more often than like I mean, you go back through the ages of Oklahoma running backs and there's always been one, sometimes if you were lucky, two guys thinking about Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine. Like you knew those guys were going to get their touches because you had seen the flashes, and it didn't matter how old they were. Like once they broke through and got into the rotation, they continued to get opportunities. That just wasn't the only thing I can think of with that bowl game is, and I don't know, I'm not reporting this. I don't think this was the case. I have no idea. The only thing I can think of is Sawchuk was showing signs of potentially wanting to look elsewhere, and this was a way of throwing him a bone at the end of the year. But like again, still that wouldn't even make that much sense because you have the depth that you do behind him. Well, I don't know.
No,
It's frustrating.
Well, and look, to be fair to DeMarco and that staff, like you've got four guys who theoretically, or I mean, it's not theoretical. We saw Sawchuk dominate to end the 23 season.
Yep.
Barnes, I think some vision issues and maybe lack of top end speed aside, is an effective runner, or he can be. Xavier Robinson doing that as a true freshman against Bama is remarkable. Taylor Tatum might have the highest ceiling of anybody in that group, period, if he'll quit fumbling the football. I don't, it's got to be hard to juggle all of those guys. I mean, it absolutely does, right? But there's just sometimes doesn't seem to be like, I mean, and Sawchuk dealt with some injuries again this year, but the fact that he got to the end of the regular season with 61 rushing yards is
it's wild.
Wild. It's wild. He went from, I think everybody's thinking he's going to be the number one guy heading into the year to like he was a complete afterthought.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, I was high on Caleb Hicks coming out of the spring and in fall camp. I was high on Caleb Hicks.
I was too. Yep.
I don't know why he didn't get on the field. I don't know. It was clear after 2 years he was not going to get on the field for this team in any substantial role. He just wasn't. I don't know. Like, I do think OU's they're gonna have to get that figured out. It's gonna have to get more streamlined because you've got talent in that room. You would think, I mean, if you're trying to project forward to next year, is it Robinson and Tatum? Is that the easy answer? And you split the workload 60-40? Like, I don't,
Here's what I'll tell you. Whatever we think it is, you and I come up with this brainchild of whatever we think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Come August 30th or whenever the first game is, throw all of that out the window because it's not going to be what we think it's going to be at all. It'll be the other two guys that we didn't talk about. Like that, I mean, you would think seniority has played a role at some point in most of the position battles. You would think that if Barnes and Sawchuk are healthy, like those are going to be guys that get opportunities, but I think it's impossible to keep Taylor Tatum off the field if he fixes the fumble situation. He's the one guy in these four that shows elite ability for the next level. I think all four of those guys can be serviceable NFL running backs. As they continue progressing. Taylor Tatum kind of gives me like Joe Mixon vibes. Like that's a guy that has something that can be a little extra, and can have some higher ceiling stuff to him for the NFL. I think it's going to be impossible to keep him off the field if he continues to progress. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's it's impossible to know what next year's going to look like with this room.
I'm not even going to guess. I'm not even going to try to guess. What I will say is I think spring practices are going to be interesting to watch.
Yep.
I think fall camp's going to be interesting to watch. And I think more than anything, that just needs to be, I'm not saying don't have flexibility with your rotation, but I think when you look across other college football teams, there's not that roulette. There's not that question mark at running back. You just don't see that as much. I think the other thing I'd like to see is we saw it a little bit earlier in the year. I'd like to see whether that's Xavier Robinson and Taylor Tatum or Sawchuk and whoever else. I'd like to see two running backs more on the field together, utilizing their. And I think because there was a play earlier in the year, and I don't know why I can't think of it, but there was a play earlier in the year where I think it was against Tulane, you where I think it was Taylor Tatum and Sawchuk on the field at the same time, or it might have been Barnes. I think it was Barnes and Tatum. You fake the handoff to Tatum, dump it to, or you fake the handoff to Barnes, hit Tatum in the flat, touchdown. Like, just I want to see more creativity and more stuff like that. I think we will in Arbuckle's offense because as frustrating as it is at times to try to figure out this running back rotation, there's talent in that room. And we should be able to see that as weapons, not question marks, I think is the best way to put it.
I agree with you. I will make a prediction. It's not going to be for anybody that's in the current room. Caleb Hicks just landed at Oklahoma State. I think he's going to be a problem in the Big 12 next year.
I agree.
That's a guy that, and you saw it just as much as I did, in spring practices, anytime he had an opportunity, he looked the most SEC ready of the group. Physically, whenever he hit the hole, it just looked a little bit different. I think that's a guy, that's going to be one of those situations where OU fans see a box score and he goes for like 123 against someone. You're like, why in the heck did that not happen at Oklahoma? That's going to be one of those stories.
Well, here's the thing. Spring football is always hype season. It always has been. I don't think it'll be as much the case this year or this coming year as it has at times, but there were consistent guys we talked about, and some of them panned out. Grayson Halton might have been the top of that list. Deion Burks, who was going to have a really, really good year before injuries and all that stuff happened. He was on pace for more than 70 receptions. I mean, he was going to have an awesome year. Bauer Sharp, as much as he became a legitimate criticism of fans, still led this team in receiving. It's not like that buzz came out of nowhere. As I hide from comments that are coming. Caleb Hicks, we just missed on. He wasn't going to, and look, when you've got guys like Xavier Robinson and Taylor Tatum in the room, I'm not saying I don't get it. I'm very surprised that Caleb Hicks not only wasn't a factor, but that he was a complete non-factor. That surprised me. It just did. I do think if you're looking at things that need to get tightened and fixed next year, the running back rotation is one of the top things for me. They just that's got to get figured out over the next few months. If you had to guess, who leads the team in carries next year?
If everybody stays 100% healthy, which won't happen, in a vacuum, it would be Javonte Barnes, I think, just because of what he showed this last year. I think he showed enough to be the lead back. Who I actually think will lead the team in carries, Taylor Tatum. I think that's I think we say a year 2 jump from him. End of the year with the highest yards per carry of the guys returning, and to me looks like the guy that's most ready to be a difference maker. I am trusting that Ben Arbuckle. I about called him Zach Kitley. That's hilarious. I'm trusting that Ben Arbuckle is going to follow the lead of Zach Kitley and put his playmakers in position, his best playmakers in position to make plays. And I think Taylor Tatum is that guy. So
I think he certainly could be. I think he certainly could be if he can tighten up the ball security issues. I think he certainly could be. I'm gonna try to frame this as, let's be positive about the running back room and think about how exciting it could be. How much potential is there in that room if they get a couple of things figured out?
A ton.
Let's try to be positive.
Yeah. There's that from 1 to 4. I'll put it this. Yeah, there you go. I'll put it this way. From 1 to 4 on the depth chart, I think that might be the best room, maybe outside of safety, that you've got on the team. Just as far as just overall talent.
Yeah.
That group is, they've got it.
I think that's going to do it for us here on this installment of the Oklahoma Drill. Appreciate you guys as always tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe here at the OU Insider YouTube channel if you've not already done so. If you're not a VIP member over at OUinsider.com, never a better time to do it than now. I'll always say that because it's always the truth. It's always a good time to sign up over at OUinsider.com.
Never a bad time.
Never a bad time. Just only good vibes and only good times. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Oklahoma Drill. But until then, appreciate you guys. We'll see you next week.